Anthony Darby,
Chuck Hen.
Peninsula Podcast, and we have Dani Hart virtually with us today. How are you today, Dani?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you on. Many Baltimore and small Maryland connections, I had the privilege of working with Dani in Ocean City. I think at one point, weren't you like Ocean Dani? Wasn't that like a name that you made?
Dani, yes.
Yes. As you were kind of grinding through the marketing and some of sales programs at Salisbury University. And I kind of go through your own corporate journey as I kind of went through mine in terms of finding kind of our long-term fit. And we both kind of ended up in this wellness / just a better quality of life and questioning some of maybe the classic tales that we were told by our higher ups, that this is how you get success. It's working 70 hours a week. It's grinding, drinking 12 cups of coffee, never exercising, never doing anything else. And we both burned out pretty quick, right? So give me a little bit about your story and where you are today.
Yeah. So, I think when we first met as bartenders, I remember being kind of obsessed with psychology, right? And so I showed up to one of my first marketing classes at Salisbury, and Professor Morris asked, "Has anybody heard of the book Biology? It's like the truth and lies of why we buy." And I was like, "Actually, I've got it in my book bag right here," and pulled it out. And I think that journey has started then, but really has continued. And now, it started with going to school for marketing and environmental studies. So I got to see both sides of the spectrum, if you will, of the people that are super passionate about fixing real problems in the world, but don't necessarily have the means to do it. And then on the other side, the marketers who are really great at selling things and grinding, as you say, but don't really always have the real mission behind what they're doing, or can't really relate that, on the surface. So I always felt this draw in between the two my entire career. I did online fundraising for a while for nonprofits. That was nice because I raised money for nonprofits like the Wilderness Society and WWF and these large organizations that are making a meaningful impact. And then I moved out to California and decided to start getting into tech. And that was first in helping people pay off credit card debt with lower interest rate loans. And in that journey, I met the former chief science officer of eHarmony, Dr. Galen Buckwalter. He was the chief science officer at the company at the time. And he started to really open my eyes around personality and also how most Americans are dealing with financial stress that has the same symptoms as PTSD, which is like just totally mind-blowing for me. And so I started to then apply psychometrics to marketing, and then ended up going to a company called Growth Hackers, where I led a 500-person conference around how to grow your company, learning from the tech startups like Facebook and Airbnb and Uber and all the head honchos, which led me to my own burnout, because I not only was sprinting this entire time, but also being exposed to both ends of those spectrums. As I mentioned earlier, I felt this natural draw of, hey, the way that these companies are operating and the way that we're teaching companies to grow really isn't sustainable. And there are a lot of negative externalities that are occurring that we're not really putting into the mix of, like what these companies are valued at, and the whole incentive model going back to, why people buy, is really getting people hooked and getting them addicted to these products that we're now seeing are not always great for us. So now I'm kind of refocusing those things, the way that I approach work, and really just starting with, what does it mean to live a balanced lifestyle in this day and age with tech, at our fingertips at all times. And, I think it looks a little bit different for everybody. So that's what's exciting about the personality side, to be able to draw some comparisons there. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of where I've been and where I'm at now.
So right now you're serving as the content or director of content for, is it PsyML?
Yes, and that stands for Psychology and Machine Learning.
And what are you doing in that role? Are you obviously applying what you've learned, and tell me some kind of the real life applications that you're doing in that role.
Yeah, so as the director of content, it's really helping to form the feedback of personality assessments. So when somebody takes an assessment, which, we have a lot of different clients that use our services, but one example is FabFitFun, which is a subscription service where people can get a box delivered with all of these self-care products. And so digging into their community, they now have a personality assessment that's related to self-care. So you can see what your personality is and what that means in terms of how you approach self-care. We also applied this methodology at the fintech startup, which was, what is your financial personality? So you could start to see why you make these patterns in your life and how you can live healthy within those means. So it really comes down to a model that we use, which used to be Ocean or the Big Five framework, and now we've gone to Hexaco, which is a more robust version of the Ocean framework. And so Hexaco stands for honesty, humility, emotionality, extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness to experience. And so these 6 dimensions were developed across cultures, languages, genders, everything to form what it means to be a human. And so most people, well, everybody really has a dominant trait where they stand outside of the norm of the rest. And so for me, I'm high openness. And so I write the feedback that goes directly to those people when they see, oh, I'm high openness. What does that mean? So whether it's specific to a client or our own version that we have on our website, psyml.co/personality, you can take a quick assessment there. But that's pretty much how I operate now, is writing that feedback specifically to those different personalities.
That's really neat. And it's funny. Question number 4, what do you not want to talk about? Answer, I'm an open book. Yeah. That correlates well with the stigma that you just painted for yourself, which is cool. And that's
personality brand for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that wanted me to have you come on today. Was we sat in my office when we were still, and I'm excited for you to actually be able to physically come and see what it looks like now downstairs. But just to have that openness and being able, it's tough sometimes when you're in that high pressure. Like I know that that you were achieving a high level of success, but being open with yourself and being open with your peers and saying, look, just because I'm successful doesn't mean that I'm happy. And there's that expectation that like you always have to be happy if you're having a high level of success. And unfortunately, there's not always that correlation. Sometimes that can be really tough to deal with internally, especially when you like walk the walk of, look at me leading by example, and then all of a sudden like you have a challenge. Like that was one of the questions that I kind of wanted to throw at you is you definitely don't lack any of the knowledge around the psychology of how to handle your day, right? And like what top performers do, and you get all this feedback, and you're constantly analyzing other people, so you have this in you. Are there like a couple maybe high level things that you have to do to make sure that you constantly apply them for yourself and that you don't fall into some of those areas that are not good zones for you to be in?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that this is now like when I coach people, this is kind of like the framework that I take them through, because it started with me. Like I found something that worked really well for me, and it led me to, okay, these are my guardrails and I need to live within these guardrails. And if I don't, then I know that I'm going to like either burn out or get depressed or super anxious. And so that starts with, what are the core values that you truly believe in? And it takes a little bit of self-exploration to get there. I can send a link so that you can provide it in the show notes of a simple exercise. It's like, it probably takes 2 hours to do. I revisit it every year just to make sure like, hey, these are still the values that like I want to uphold, because obviously things change, right? Like pandemics happen and maybe like family becomes more of a priority than it was in the past because there's different environmental pressures. But starting with those core values is what allows all of us to live with authenticity, right? And that is what leads to a life where we feel balanced. You know, if we're constantly looking for, you know, monetary gains and stuff, and we don't know why we're doing that, then there's a clear disconnect. And so when we push our bodies to the limit and our minds to the limit, and we basically like reach an unhealthy level of stress, then it's easy to burn out and say, why am I doing this? None of this matters. And then it's like a big collapse. So I think coming back to, okay, core values, you have those guardrails. I have about 6 that I live by. And each of those 6, like I check in every quarter to say, how am I meeting them? Because what I found is that in the past, I maybe was meeting 3 of them. And then the other 3, just like, you know, health, for example, wasn't a priority. Family wasn't a priority, those things. And it added up where I was like, okay, if I don't focus on these things, then I'm not going to feel authentic to myself and I'm going to burn out. I'm very thankful that I had the experience of burnout to be able to come up with this and help lead other people down this path, because I can't tell you what your core values are. Only you can do that, right? Like the self-reflection is really what's important, but I can help guide people through that. So that's what's exciting now.
So I guess I got a question. So a lot of this stuff, I mean, like you've been speaking about, everybody's different. Everybody has their own set of core values. Everybody has dominant character traits. How much of what you guys do is figuring out, because I guess you guys do some work with companies and stuff still too. How much of this is like, okay, so you have a huge organization and everybody in the organization takes these personality tests and they come back and everybody's a little bit different. Are there ways to piece these different personalities together through like a set of core values, I guess, if that makes sense, like within an organization?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to just note too that there are no bad personalities, and having varying values and varying personality traits is actually a good thing because it pushes all of us to be a little bit more like rounded, I guess. We've all evolved to develop these different personality traits for a reason. It's because we need everybody. If we had all high openness people, then like we probably wouldn't get anything done because we'd just be chasing one idea after the other versus, okay, we have a high openness person, but we've also got a high conscientious person who's going to help break that down into the details and actually execute all of these ideas or help prioritize them, you know, whatever it is. So I don't think that there's necessarily like anything that draws them together based on values, but the biggest thing with personality and working together as a team is self-awareness. If you have people on your team that are not self-aware and aware in all terms of personality too, just not your own, but also realizing, hey, you know what, Darby, he's showing these signs of stress that are actually indicative of his personality. So maybe we should take it easy on him versus giving him a hard time and getting frustrated that he's not delivering on time, right? It gives a little bit more empathy when you can look through that lens to say, okay, how am I reacting? 1, 2, why are they reacting that way? Why is there frustration? What can I learn from this? And once you get that, then, you know, maybe, yeah, there is a bunch of core values underneath the surface for the entire team, but I don't think it's necessarily a prerequisite.
It's more just like learning the other, like you said, like learning other people's personalities and learning to work within their confines to kind of.
Yeah.
And maybe those core values that are underlining are things like empathy and respect and self-awareness.
Yeah, I was going to say empathy, I think, is one of the most highly coveted leadership qualities that I've learned to respect is being able to not treat everybody the same. Like I used to think at one point, like it was cool the person that treated everybody the same, but that's actually not a really effective way of leading. And you really need to understand when you deliver a message, it's not what you say, but it's almost what they're hearing, right? My dad used to always say perception's reality. And that's something that I try to think about now. And quite honestly, like as we now have 25 employees-ish, we have that number of many personalities. And when we deliver a message, there's so much more, in terms of my mind, I feel like I have to be so much more conscientious of the messages that we deliver because I know that that's a lot. It's basically 50 sets of ears that are going to be perceiving that in different ways. And it's important that you get the message out that has a uniform resignation with everyone, even though they all may be having their own personal way of digesting that information. Some are saying, what's it mean to me? Some are saying, what's this mean to the team? Some are saying, what's this mean to my coworker? Everyone kind of has maybe a different why, which is, to your point, earlier you talked about one of your core values was kind of working towards things like your why. And I think for us, we try a lot to make sure that our employees know like why we ask things of them and why our core values are important to us and why it's important that we demonstrate certain core values or do things a certain way. You know, we're in a high image spot where a lot of people pay attention to what we do, and in an emerging market, it's really important for us as we feel like to be a good steward of that reputation. And sometimes not everyone understands why we do the things that we do, but in our mind we have these core values of being being treated like a traditional medical facility, and we have to go and execute on these things. And sometimes that means that we have maybe a little bit more stricter ship than some. We're not going to go and really cater to some of those recreational markets or recreational things. Some of our employees would probably prefer that we did, right? It's just the reality of the things. Other employees are really happy that we don't. And I think just making sure that everyone shares in a core value of why it's important that we do what we do is the most important, not necessarily if you even necessarily agree or that's how you feel.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So in all of this personality, there's still some physical things that are happening as well, right? So you one of the things that we try to talk a lot about is kind of the mind-body connection. So if we're talking about guardrails, one of the things that I started doing 18 months ago was working out, and that's like a must for me. We just went through a grand opening, and I missed about like 10 days without going to the gym, and all of a sudden I started literally feeling my body changing. And after simply one day back of a really hard workout, I woke up this morning feeling kind of honestly regenerated a bit. And it's very evident to me that my stress levels and the way that my mind works, my ability to sleep, all these things that are what I used to consider all mental things are all tied to this physical exertion, to have some physical activity. So I think yoga is a great way to bring that together. You obviously feel really strongly about that. So tell us a little bit about your journey towards yoga and what it meant to you.
Yeah, I totally resonate with what you're saying. And it's like, if I get onto like the third day of not moving my body, then I feel it mentally, emotionally, everything. It's like, it's very clear. So the movement part of the equation is very important. I think that with yoga, it was so unique to me because I played sports growing up. We stretched, before and after, but there was never any like mindfulness to it. It was like, we're counting out loud and that kind of stuff. It's just like,
just make sure you're not out of count, right? That would be the worst thing in the world. I wasn't wearing my hamstrings, but heaven forbid my 9 is off.
Yeah, and it was a team thing, which is, it's great for sports. Like I'm not knocking that at all, but I never took the time to really turn inward and use movement to help guide that. And so when I first left the tech world, full time, at least when I hit my burnout, I was getting migraines, all of that jazz. One thing that I did do was I would go to a weekly yoga class, and it was at the beach. And I think the outdoor part plus yoga was just exactly what I needed to get back to me every week. And it was like a battery. If I didn't go, I didn't recharge my battery. And I could run, I could exhaust myself in every other way, but there was something deeper with yoga. And I think that I had an amazing teacher that just did a phenomenal job at guiding me and teaching me like what yoga actually meant, which was bigger than just the poses and the breath work and everything. It was really guiding into things like your intuition and your own wisdom and really learning from yourself. But I had never done that. So even training for marathons, which taught me tons, right? Being able to use your breath to guide you through 26 miles is its own challenge. But I never listened that well. And that was because I wanted to get that sticker or whatever, like I wanted
You were just telling your body, what to do all the time and never really listening to what it had to say back, right?
Exactly. It's like, just go do this. You're tired. That's okay. Like, drink some water. You'll be back on the road and tomorrow. So yoga was the first time that I could connect the mind, body, and being so burnt out in tech and just chronically stressed. It was exactly what I needed. And at first things started showing up that I was like, what is going on here? Like, I basically blew out my shoulders. I blew out my hips because you're used to sitting at a desk and it's just like nonstop slouching and not standing up often and that kind of stuff. And so it takes time to actually bring that back to a healthy state. And at first I was rushing it because, again, I wasn't listening, right? When I started the yoga training, it was like, I want to be like that next flexible person over there. And I just looked externally. And then as soon as I got injured, I was like, all right, this isn't going to work. Like, I've got 2 more months of doing this. I can't continue at this pace. And that at that point was when I said, my intention for the foreseeable future, which, by the way, it's still my intention, is to be patient with myself, because being in a world of tech, and I think anybody can relate to it in 2020, especially, that everything's being thrown at us so quickly that we expect instant gratification. It's like, what's next? How do we, feed, like, just keep giving me this adrenaline. And when I don't have it, I feel really bad. And so going from a tech world where I was like really good at what I did, always checking notifications, to going to yoga where I was like, I know nothing about my body. I know nothing about like my mind and how it all connects. And I have to now teach this to other people. Like, this is really hard. This is really, really hard. It was super humbling. And And then it was just like, okay, I need to be patient. And now the self-awareness switch has been flipped on. And sometimes I have to dim it because I'm like, this is too much. I'm learning too much about myself. There's some trauma that I'm bringing up, whatever, and I need to dim it so I can get actual work done. But it's a beautiful thing to be in control of. And I think that that's what yoga does, is it gives you that switch. And at first you're going to be like, that's on and off. Like, that's too much, or it's great, it's bright, awesome. But over time you learn that there's a dimmer and that you can control that.
Yeah. And I started doing a little bit of yoga. I don't do it as much as like I used to, but me and my wife kind of were like, okay, stress. Like, I've always been physically active, but I never stretched ever. So like, you could just tell. But I still bring it back and do it like once or twice a week. And even for 20 or 30 minutes, just that little bit of a reset. Between that and like breathing for me, so like even really simple breath techniques, like I'll do box breathing before I work out, and I can just completely reset my body, and I can just go in and like with a clear mind, not have any real intentions, just focus on what I want to. And it's pretty crazy. And I use the breath work, and I've tried to teach it to my little ones when they get upset or they're mad, like, okay, go out, and it's crazy to think that just by doing that breath work, it's just that little simple kind of reset goes so far in like, getting your mind back to like a really good place.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's definitely engaging a system within your body that relaxes you. And so, like, I used to always say, like, before you leave and enter a room, like, take a deep breath, right? Do that reset. It doesn't have to be long. You don't need an hour to meditate. You can meditate just by moving from one place to the next, right? And just say, okay, I'm going to take that deep breath, check in with myself, and then I'm moving on. Because a lot of times we just carry stuff from one place to the next and we never let it go. But that breath can allow us to do that very quickly.
Yeah, and I think that, like, so I'm in the very infancy stages of taking a couple yoga classes and trying to see where it falls in my regimen. But I appreciate the humblingness of it, and kind of the, in a world where I'm constantly around people in yoga, like, if you can't get your palm to the floor, or you can't, like, there's no one to look around to, like, it's all you, right? And it does require you to listen to your body. And I think there's also that humblingness of just, like, you're on that mat, like, there's nowhere where you can go, like, you just kind of have to, like, deal with some things, and through breath and through, and I've had fairly fast progressions, like, you know, like, I've seen some results already, just like Chuck mentioned, some of the breathing exercises, some of that light work has been really good for me. Even like, even just implementing some of, like, the additional planking throughout the day, and just doing these different things that allow me to kind of, like, to your point, connect with my body. And, like, even if it's only for 1 minute and I'm just focusing on keeping my core muscles and not falling to the ground, like, that's 1 minute that I'm not thinking about the business, our 20 employees, the MMCC screwing something up if they were to ever do that. Not saying that they ever do. But all these different things that happen, you can't, it's like if you put all your focus on one thing, then you're impossible to focus on the other things. And it's like a mini vacation in a world where we're constantly getting emails, and there's no, like, I'll see you guys tomorrow at the office, and you leave at 5 o'clock, and, like, maybe you saw something in the newspaper that riled things up in the morning, but other than that, like, there was no news until 9 a.m. the next day. You know, that's not the environment that we live in, and you almost have to have those interruptions of the day to day before you go crazy. Like, I think I'm constantly also trying to just understand, like, where we've come as, like, human beings. Like, 100 years ago, there was so much manual labor in our day-to-day life where you actually had to go get your own water. Like, you had to, like, there wasn't all these modern conveniences that would allow you to just focus on all these other things. Like, what does that mean? And then how do you supplement some of those artifacts of what human existence has been up until the technology era, to give your body something that it's seeking from, like, an ancient perspective. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, your body's been human.
The human being itself is an evolution of thousands of years. It's only been 100 years. It's only been 100 years since there's even been a telegraph machine or a telephone, and damn near 20 years since everyone had a cell phone in their pocket. Like, it's crazy that we made such quick advancements, and our lives are so much different. And I just think, without pausing for a second, being mindful of what all those changes mean to us. What's it mean that our food isn't being picked out of a field anymore, that it's being made in a place that, you know, that's a factory? What does this mean?
You know, I think that you'll find this interesting. I heard this theory recently that...
Just so you know, real quick, Brandon says we're not going to get cut off on time, so we can keep going.
Awesome. I heard a theory recently that's kind of related to this, that hundreds of years ago, cannabis was part of the diet, whether that was hemp or, you know, anything, right? So that's actually where the endocannabinoid system originated, was because we were consuming it like
all the livestock, hemp was everywhere. Then the livestock were eating hemp, that we were basically getting these to your point, we were getting these cannabinoids endogenously through our food and through our diet, hemp seeds, all these different, I mean, when you look at staple diets of the colonial era, I mean, they were eating lots of hemp. They were utilizing this hemp plant in a variety of different ways, oils, topicals. So it's interesting to think about that, right? And, like, all of a sudden you just ban it and take it out of the diets. You take it, and then we see all these diseases that are unexplainable. And I'm not, to your point, like, I don't want to draw a line that far, but I will draw the line as far as saying that the monumental changes in the diets of Americans and the patients that we see absolutely are causing these unexplainable diseases, and a lot of good work is being done by addressing the imbalances of an endocannabinoid system and a diet. I mean, the last guest that we had on was a dietitian, because we feel so strongly that a lot of our patients' diets are causing their inflammation. They're causing some of their mental health concerns. Like, you know, sugar is a wild drug when you look at what it does to a body unchecked. And, like, if it's being consumed through a drink like Pepsi all day long and things like this, there's a lot of consequences that unfortunately a lot of people aren't mindful of. They're not connecting the dots. They're starting to, but they didn't for a long time.
And going back to the environmental studies degree from Salisbury, right? We were learning like, okay, what happens when you subsidize corn? Everybody grows corn, right? And then what happened after that? High fructose corn syrup. What happened after that? Diabetes, right? Like you can trace pretty much anything back to a source, you know, it doesn't mean it's always going to be accurate that you're like, I figured out diabetes. No, but like you can start to draw some lines that start to make a lot of sense that at the end of the day, there's an incentive behind everything. And I think that, you know, just the more that we can be aware of those things and make the jump to say, you know what, instead of eating this crap, I'm going to really listen to like what my body's telling me and also do the work to understand what it needs. Whether that's, you know, the right food, the right exercise, whatever. Another thing that I think disease is or what's causing a lot of disease too is our stress, right? Like the level of stress that we're under is completely different than anything in history. Not only because we're working really hard and it's like, you know, a lot of it's not tied to maybe those core values that we have, but also we're doing it in isolation. Like a lot of people are working from home. They're doing it, you know, on their own. They don't necessarily have a family they go home to. Like people are more alone now than they ever have. And that you can see that in just like single bedroom apartments and people living alone. They don't have that human connection that helps relieve a lot of that stress. And loneliness is like one of the worst things for your body. So I remember reading Peak Performance, and the equation that stuck with me and continues to stick with me is stress plus rest equals growth. And within stress, you have the ability to control how you perceive that as well. And if you're perceiving stress as something that is welcomed and something that is going to teach you and help you grow, then you are going to be a happier and healthier person versus, oh my gosh, I have to do this again. And, you know, like life is a constant challenge. I'm always the victim. That is going to cause disease.
It's a mindset. And that goes back to like, and you know, and for me, it's always been like that mindset, right? And I've always I love to challenge myself, no matter what it is, to try new things, to, you know, run extra hard, to work out, to do these different things. And like, I know that if I don't stress my body and my mind in those good kind of natural ways, I guess, like stress is going to come in eventually. And it's going to be in a negative way, and it's going to impact you negatively. And like so many people, I feel like this day and age, it's weird because everybody wants to sit inside, go on social media and just look at things. And to Darby's point, eat crappy food all day long. And they're not challenging themselves to grow. They're not challenging themselves in good, stressful ways. And all of a sudden they have, to your point, like this victim mentality where everything happens to them for a reason. And all of a sudden this stress is they're just inundated with it and they don't know how to deal with it. And I think that's a really big problem with a lot of people.
Yeah, it definitely can be consuming to folks. And I think to take it even one step further from one of my observations and being in this position is a lot of addiction issues. They actually are driven through stress and that loneliness component, that lack of connection, and feeling isolated, and then feeling kind of like drugs fill that void, and that comes in a lot of different ways. But I would hope that as bringing this campus to fruition, you know, one of the things that I had to struggle with is what does your model look like now in a post-COVID world, and my observation is people are more stressed out now than ever. People need small exercise classes and yoga and all these things that we're going to do in a community room more than ever. They need cannabis as an option, so they're not quickly getting on Xanax and all these other much stronger, sometimes very appropriate and very applicable medicines, but oftentimes overprescribed and substituting a better diet, more activity, more exercise, and a more long-term stable solution. We're just trying to promote that because it doesn't seem like there's a mindfulness of it, especially in underserved communities like the Eastern Shore of Maryland, where you have lots of Title I schools, and you have this sometimes subsidy programs that it's much easier for them to get canned food than it is fresh vegetables. It's easier for them to get some of these products, and it becomes a cultural thing, right? Where mom, grandma, great-grandma, everyone did these things, so this is kind of what's embedded in me. And sometimes just breaking those norms in a wellness campus like this, explaining how much diet can impact you, gut health to mental health, balancing your endocannabinoid system, balancing inflammation, stress, all these different things, I think now is needed more than ever. And one of the things that we learned with the dispensary was that cannabis is a super effective tool for stress. A lot of people, one of the things that they love about cannabis is that it's helpful for stress. But they were coming in with these monumental problems and issues, and quite honestly, like, behavioral things that they're doing to themselves, trying to find which strain is going to make their life better. And it was just like, look, I'm not here to tell you that any of this is going to help you at all. Like, matter of fact, I refuse, because I'm going to be honest with you. Like, you can't solve. This is a tool that you can use to maybe help reduce your stress, so then you go out and walk and exercise and get your body moving and help reduce that. You know what I mean? It's just like, it was like this cycle of pattern that I knew, unless we had the wellness shop with the supplements that people are lacking because of their diets are lacking, and sometimes it's easier to get them to take a supplement than a completely change course of a diet that they've had for the last 30 years. Implementing, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think that a lot of this draws back to personality too, because I think about my own experience and burnout, all that, like while I was running from the idea that like I needed to leave tech and I needed to pursue this other path, like deep down I was just very unhappy, and I didn't want to get out of bed. It was just like, oh, I have to do this again. And cannabis was part of my diet, right? It was like, before, when I get home from work, it would just help me tune everything out. But like at the end of the day, I wasn't addressing what was really going to make me happy. I was using it to cope. And for that period of my life, it made sense. Like, it helped me. It really did. And I'm very thankful for my experience with it. But at the end of the day, I had to make significant changes in order to live a more sustainable life. And now cannabis is more of a spiritual thing for me, right? And so but it's important to say that for high openness people, they are more likely to get addicted to drugs. So knowing that about myself, I need to check and say, like, what am I actually using this for? Am I using it because I'm in a social setting and I'm connecting with those around me, or I'm connecting with nature and that this is part of my spiritual journey? Or am I using this to run away from that daily life? Because those are very different scenarios. And I'm lucky that I don't have, significant health issues that I need a specific cannabis strand to help fix. I think that they like PTSD and like some of these other like research that's being done, it totally makes sense, right? Like, it's like, yeah, you're going to sleep better. You're going to have a better life. You can actually go outside because you feel confident enough to do that. Like, that's a different ballpark than running, right? Running from what's really causing you unhappiness.
Yeah, it goes back to that personality thing, to your point, 100%, and us having to address our patients. And that's why part of the patient services came to light, was because through these consultations, we can learn a lot about, through like the addiction of opioids. We deal with a lot of patients that come to us that are addicted to opioids, and it was amazing to me how much different their personalities are. Everything from the guy who's had the same office job for 25 years and was in a horrible car accident, and the doctor gave him 3 months supply day one. He was in a ton of pain, and then the next thing you know, it just became his new normal to take pills every day. Not really, it was kind of this like slow decline, versus maybe someone who's come in and they've tried every pill under the sun, and opioids just happen to be the most dangerous of the ones that they did. So the personality plays so much into it, and just understanding, kind of also in an ADD segue, you talked about earlier, about sometimes knowing about how much to unpack and address your self-awareness, and that sometimes you can't just open the whole box up and go, oh my gosh, I realize all these things about myself. This is so overwhelming. Now I can't do anything about it, right? Like, you have to have some level of awareness to say, sometimes, okay, I know this about myself, but that's going to be a process to get there. So I'm going to be aware of that, but I'm not going to let it consume me. I think sometimes cannabis can be really effective in that. Sometimes cannabis can be really helpful in digesting some of that, but then you really got to make that next action to start alleviating that problem. You got to take that next action to start to getting there. And I think, when I was at American Express of all places, they started hammering home a growth mindset for the first time. And it was so eye-opening to me when I started looking at some of my, because I feel like I always had growth mindset. I'm curious by nature. I really like to learn and educate. I like to challenge myself. But I could tell that some of the sales folks that had been in American Express for 15 years with pretty kosher jobs, they weren't really looking to grow too much, right? They had that fixed mindset, and they put the infamous graph on the wall, right? And the growth mindset in blue and the fixed mindset in red. And they go through everything and they're reading them off one by one. And you can see people with the fixed mindsets in their heads start going down more and more because they're uncomfortable by nature of any type of change. So even introducing a mindset like growth mindset is a change element for them that makes them uncomfortable. And it was just interesting to start from a psychological standpoint, understanding, wow, I am so much better at, or so much more open to dealing with change as a personality than many of my coworkers will ever be. And that's actually a really good tool for me, right? That allows me to take chances when other people won't. It allows us to go like that. So just understanding that personality is kind of interesting.
Definitely. And I think, like, to your point about the growth mindset, when I was working at Growth Hackers, we were really just helping companies adopt a certain process, and that was the growth process. So with any company, it was, okay, identify one, how you get value. So I think that goes back to like the core values for, like, if we're to draw the comparisons from company to individual core values, that's how an individual would get value out of life. And then what's the biggest opportunity, or what is the biggest thing holding you back? And like, if it's, I can't sleep well, and so it's causing the rest of my life to just suffer, then that's something to hone in on, and then say, okay, now it's a feedback loop. It's a positive feedback loop where we're coming up with as many ideas as we can to figure out how to sleep better, right? I'm going to go to bed earlier. I'm going to try lavender tea. I'm going to try some CBD, whatever. And then testing those and being able to say, hey, what, the lavender tea didn't work, but the CBD did wonders. So now I'm going to add that into my routine. And then that comes back to like coming up with new ideas. And then before you know it, you actually start to achieve this problem. And then you realize, okay, that's not the biggest problem anymore. What's next? And then now it's exercise or movement. And so it's a more gradual approach where you get small wins. You don't always get wins, but you get small wins. And then you're able to incorporate those into your daily habits or weekly habits. And like, that's how I've approached all of my like daily and weekly habits. And it's been really, I think, a lot better than my initial approach, which was just, this is the way I want to live, and now I'm going to live this way. Because 3 days in, I'd be like, that's too hard. I'm done. And they weren't even the habits that I necessarily needed. I just thought I did because I saw it online somewhere.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, to your point, like you see something on, like if you're in this growth world and you're constantly open to adopting new things, sometimes it's it can be overwhelming in terms of where to go next and what's the most important, and you just make decisions. I mean, for everyone it's got to be different, and I think understanding what gives you the most gratification, maybe it's playing a contact sport, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's it's 3 contact sport nights a month and then 1 yoga session, right? So it's just finding that balance. It's
a self-awareness, right? Everybody's different, so you got to kind of pick and choose and experiment with things until you find what's right kind of for you.
That stress plus rest equals growth, that I think that is so important. I also really appreciate the fact that you can look at stress in a positive way. Like to Chuck's point, like my openness to change has always come with stress, but I've always been like, my ability to handle this stress will be kind of the dictation of my success in general. It's kind of how I've always felt. And I think now that I also understand how important it is to rest as well, is that, okay, if I'm going to run at 1,000 miles an hour, then maybe that means at 2:00 on a Tuesday, even if someone's maybe looking at me weird, I'm going to the gym for an hour, because I know that my level of stress or my ability to handle the stress that comes with what I need to do to get done is going to be much more I'll be mitigated in a better way than if I just try to grind through that 2 to 3 hour time frame. Don't do any self-care. Don't take a break from this just to try to prove to myself that like I can outgrind the next guy. Like to me, that was like a young man's game before kids. Yeah. Now it's like, it's about working smart. It's about knowing, because I think to your point, like if you've never had that burnout experience, sometimes it seems mythical. It doesn't actually seem like something that could happen to you. And then when it does happen to you, it's pretty humbling and being like, holy crap. You know, that's
right.
kind of
like you think you have an idea of what it is, and then you experience it, you're like, whoa. and also burnout too, like, so I kind of look at like the stress plus rest equals growth, like as a pendulum, right? So you could go from like being super stressed to very rested, and then like there's also anxiety that can come with that, because if you're not adding enough of the good stress, then you know you're
that's me
we call that day 2 at Chuck Henn's vacation.
I can't go on vacation for more than like 3 days and I'm like, oh my god, I'm doing absolutely nothing. Like, but that's just but I know that's
you, right?
That's me, and I know that's like something that, you know, I've learned to cope with it. And then I'm still going to get up at 4:30 in the morning. I'm going to go run and do these other things. And then I can still enjoy those pieces of my vacation, spend that time with the family and stuff like that. It's just kind of, you know, so
that's an opportunity of growth for you too, right? To be able to say like, how do I slow down and actually enjoy this time that I have? Because, you know, it's a shifting of mindset to say, yeah, I'm actually going to be better off when I get back if I take this week and actually dedicate it to rest. And like, rest is really hard for a lot of people. And it's kind of crazy. I coach a lot of founders, and my job is primarily to give permission for people to rest. You know, it's like, take time, like take a day off. I want you to go to the sauna or like whatever. I want you to just melt it all off and then like report back to me. And like every single time they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how much I needed that. Right. And it's just, we don't realize how much we're carrying around with us until we start to release it. And then it's like, why was I not doing that before? Now it's part of my routine, right? Now it's every month or every week or whatever it is.
When you're in a leadership role and it's your responsibility to take care of your employees and you have that mindset like we do, we literally, like when I pull in that parking lot, these are my, you know, it's my responsibility to provide for them. This is my job to make sure that they have a job moving forward in 6 months and 6 years. We're looking out for them, right? But there's not always anyone making those same judgment calls for the C-level, same type of nets. We try to do it within our leadership team. We try to keep an eye on each other and be mindful of what's going on. But like, I don't know. I mean, quite frankly, there's just so much stressful stuff. It's almost tough to be able to, you know, it's like, sorry you have all this shit going on, but you know, we still have to get our license fee, and we still have to like get our shit done. Like, sorry.
Integration. I mean, it sounds like you're already doing a really good job with just being able to say like, hey, I'm leaving at 2 to go work out, or I'm using this next 10 minutes to check in with myself, my mini vacation. Like, I love that idea. Like, even being able to just label like a 10-minute meditation as a vacation, which I think like internally, that's kind of how I perceive it. I'm like, ooh, I get to go like tune into myself. Like, this is great. But it takes time to develop. And I think that so many people start and they don't know why they're doing it, and they just don't see the value in it. And so it really starts with, why do you want to do this? Like, do you want to have a more authentic life and live, you know, where you don't run away from things all of the time, but you're addressing them? You know, it's a lot of uncomfortable stuff that you have to go through, but you also get to experience so much more in life, whether, you know, like, and it's appreciation for life, but it's also appreciation for the shitty things in life, because you know that on the other side of that shitty thing, you're going to have a better appreciation for the next great thing.
That's awesome. I think that's actually a good point to end. Is there anything that we missed? Is there anything that you want to get out? Please make sure you give any of your website and any social media information you want to get out there.
Yeah, well, this has been fun. I always love talking to you, Darby. So yeah, my website's growthgal.com, and I'm working on a personality page. So if someone wants to take the personality assessment that I've written the feedback for, which will give you insight into your personality based on Hexaco, and also like how you function in teams, both optimally and also when you're under stress. So I think it's a really good resource for any team as well. But I'll add that on that page. So growthgal.com/personality, and on Instagram at growthgal. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I love the work that you're doing. Keep it up and keep growing.
Back at you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Dani.
See you later.